When Emperor Yongle passed away in the summer of 1424, 30 concubines residing in the royal harem and many others were given the dreaded flood-red square-shaped piece of silk clothing. This tiny cloth indicated the Yongle Emperor's preference for these 30 concubines. Welcome back to another exciting video. Today's video is about filthy secret lives of Imperial Chinese concubines. Additionally, it implied that they were not to survive the monarch. In the prohibited city, a concubine's life was just as risky, extravagant, compelled, frivolous, and illegal. How miserable and lonely were their lives? What complex screening procedure were they subjected to? What conditions must be met for a concubine to live in Imperial China? On the one hand, they helped China enter its golden era and expand its global influence. On the other hand, they did so by oppressing their people and taking their girls as concubines for the emperor if he so desired. Keeping concubines appears to be a long-standing tradition. Chinese history most likely began with the Western Zhou dynasty, which rose to power around 1000 BCE. A guy could have as many concubines as he wanted back then because he could purchase them. However, there was a cap placed on the number of concubines a male could have during the Eastern Han era. The more freedom one had to have concubines, the higher the status. The term concubine has had many different meanings throughout history, but it had two distinct meanings in Imperial China. A man could only have one woman at a time in pre-modern China, except the first wife could not become pregnant until the man was 40. They were having them, so they would retain concubines to satisfy their urge for polygamy. Concubine status was higher than that of a servant but lower than that of a man's bride. In the emperor's case, however, the concubines were meant to be servants hired for personal use. If the emperors could not do so, their primary goal was to produce a male heir for the king. The term mean in Chinese means brilliant, but their treatment of their concubine was nothing short of abhorrent. The Han Emperor might even be regarded as one of the best rulers China has ever had. He was rumored to imprison and punish his concubines in his castle, but behind closed doors. Because of his intense possessiveness for them, he made an effort to have complete control over both their life and mortality. In addition, the Han ruler revived the custom of concubines dying if their ruler died. As long as the emperor gave the order, he also made it mandatory for subjects to provide their girls to the administrators. The Han Emperor built a subpar prohibited palace in 1366 to solidify his imperial authority and ensure the royal family's safety. 2 years after the Ming Palace was finished, the Han Emperor relocated his throne to Nanjing. Under Yongli's reign, Beijing's Forbidden City was constructed. Concubines led solitary lives while performing their primary duty to the emperor, empress, and the emperor's parents, to provide the emperor with their skills and create male heirs for them. The authenticity of the emperor's children is still unquestionable because eunuchs was the only man permitted to access the inner court. The emperor was only seen as less important than the emperor and his, who was revered as the parent of heaven. All concubines, servants, and eunuchs who worked for the royal family were controlled by the emperor's doer and demand. The consorts occupied the following position in the harem order, but their number varied depending on the reigning dynasty. Most of the performers in these performances were high-ranking officials' daughters who had either been given to or claimed as partners by the emperor. However, they weren't legally wed to him. The ranks of concubines would start after performances. The emperor would determine the concubine levels, ranging from 3 to 5. The politics among the concubines were intense, and to progress, they would have to connive, deceive, and impress in addition to jealously guarding their unofficial positions. Giving birth to a male heir for the emperor was the best method to rise through the ranks. However, the likelihood that they would genuinely spend the night with the emperor decreased as the number of contours increased. The eunuchs, who held a position of great authority in the court, oversaw and kept an eye on the majority of their operations. Before the emperor entered their bedchamber, concubines had to bathe and be examined by a court doctor. The emperor had access to hundreds, sometimes thousands, of concubines. Any woman that the emperor visited would be the target of jealous rivalries. Concubines lived in their chambers and spent their days sewing, applying makeup, and interacting with other concubines. Many of them lived their entire lives at the palace without ever meeting the monarch. Love was forbidden for the concubines, though there were a minimal number of exceptions to the norm, and some of them did bond relationships with eunuchs or other officials if caught. They paid dearly for their sins by working in the castle. No consort was permitted to communicate in any way, not even with their family or the outside world. No doctors were permitted to attend to them or administer care even when they fell ill, based on illness symptoms provided by a eunuch who would go to the doctor instead. There weren't many logical methods to get out of the Forbidden City. The most straightforward option was to get elderly enough for the emperor to lose interest in youth. However, once they got away, there was no turning around for fear of getting captured. The only option on the table for them was death. Many concubines would submit to the servitude and, despite feeling relieved, would decide to continue their servitude as imperial maids or to become nuns. But there have been very few instances throughout Chinese history. The Tang dynasty's emperor sticks out the most. She started her career in the royal service as an Emperor Ta's consort when she was just 25 years old. The dead emperor's wives and concubines were expected to retire in monasteries. but Wu Jie-ten was able to win over Ta's replacement god. Xi was in control of the 1861. Xi made the sole in charge of the young emperor after leaving his 5-year-old son to rule. As social unrest in the Second Opium War ravaged China, and Alger-Cite abandoned a lavish life filled with privileges but never cared for any obligation. Outside and inside, no home in China was an exception, thanks to the Han Emperor. The Ying emperors required every young, unmarried lady without a physical defect or impairment to undergo the SHNU selection procedure. On the other hand, the Qing dynasty chose to limit the choice to the 8 banners, excluding the Han people in favor of families who were primarily Manchurian or Mongolian. The girls would be brought to the gate of the Forbidden City for inspection on the day of the selection, escorted by their parents or legal guardians. The emperor and his parents made these young females submit to a beauty examination. A thorough inspection would examine only the remaining less than 100 girls. They would have their body hair, odor, and skin infections examined if they were in the good physical condition and were not ill. The chosen girls would spend several evenings with these women, who were experts in training maids, before being sent to the training women to learn the trade of serving the royal. They would also undergo strict discipline, and those who met the requirements would be trained in appropriate behavior and how to talk, move, and walk. Additionally, they would be taught drawing, reading, writing, chess, and dancing. Those who complete this demanding instruction would work for the Empress Dowager as maids for several days. Only a tiny percentage of those who completed this complex procedure would win the emperor's favor. Most concubines live miserable, lonely lives, inevitably leading to hurtful politics and jealousy among concubines. In China, beauty was more of a curse than a blessing. When this historical era began, in Chinese culture, women were viewed as subservient beings who needed to be constantly demoralized, degraded, humiliated, and ignored. Concubines were at the bottom of the human species' food chain, and their situation was only getting worse. Unfortunately, it required a lot of injustice to make them respond. Wen Shu was the only woman to request relief and live on afterward as a free woman. Still, she could only divorce her husband, Ruler Fu, the final ruler of the Qing dynasty, after he had already become Daron. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content.